So we already made a video earlier in the week, or if I'm calculating things correctly, earlier in today's show, most likely, talking about one of the Robertson brothers. So why not go out there and talk about the other one? Because these conversations on Dallas Stars forward Jason Robertson have been kind of making the rounds on social media again. Not that they're anything particularly new, but just that the tweets that are talking about them have sparked up the discussion once again, and now there are articles being published again, and so now we have to talk about it. Do we absolutely have to? No, but it is something to talk about, which is why we are diving into the Jason Robertson trade talks. Right now, Robertson is 26 years old, and he's making $7.75 million until the end of this upcoming season. Lo and behold, the guys need a contract past this upcoming year, and with the Dallas Stars just giving all that money to Mikko Rantanen, you can debate whether or not Robertson is in a position to earn the same. Especially when you acknowledge the fact that he is 2 years removed from getting 109 points, and he has followed up that 109-point season with back-to-back 80-point seasons, too, not to mention a 6-point in 80-game showcase in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Unfortunately for Jason Robertson, this guy has not been as productive as maybe he should be if he was going to go out there and demand Mikko Rantanen-esque money. Which is why we've been talking about the idea of a Robertson trade for a while. We've spoken about teams that could be linked to this guy, teams that could use a left winger of Robertson's caliber. He's only 26 years old, so of course he is quite young. There's still a future for this guy in the NHL. But we had ourselves a show on YouTube. This is the Sick Podcast and the Eye Test, not to be confused with the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro, but this podcast was from about a week ago. You had yourselves Sean Shapiro, local beat reporter for the Dallas Stars, joining Pierre Maguire and Jimmy Murphy to discuss potentially huge changes to NHL broadcasting, the Dallas Stars firing Pete DeBoer, Jason Robertson trade rumors, and more. Again, this is the Sick Podcast - the Eye Test. This is not the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. It's a different show, technically. And there were some really interesting quotes from this broadcast that were posted about and written about online. This is what NHL Rumor Report tweeted out a few days ago, talking about what Sean Shapiro said on the broadcast. Yes, the Dallas Stars did look like at what a return could be for Jason Robertson. It was always going to be either for a roster player or part of some other bigger move. And this quote garnered a lot of attention here. The Jason Robertson trade return, the cost, the trade price for this guy getting thrown out there. Roster player or part of a bigger move. So either it would be a big one-for-one swap, or it would be some sort of a move where Jason Robertson goes for a lot more. Self-explanatory? Yeah. Kind of obvious? Also yeah. But things get a little bit more interesting when you read one of the other quotes. This is what Sean Shapiro also said regarding Jason Robertson trade rumors. We know that Dallas had kicked around the idea of going after Mitch Marner. If they were going to get Marner, that amount of money would have had to come from somewhere. This, of course, did not end up coming to fruition because Marner went over to Vegas. Dallas will have to settle for Mikko Rantanen, which I guess, ideally you would have wanted to have gotten both. You would have wanted both Marner and Rantanen. Who knows if that would have even been possible. But now, in regards to Jason Robertson, these quotes on Twitter have been posted about and written about in other articles. For example, this is what Athlon Sports went out there and posted about. Matt Levine had a very similar article regarding some of this same info. Stars likely trade package for Jason Robertson revealed. This was posted a few days ago as well. This article cites both of the same tweets that we went out there and looked at. The Stars reportedly want a roster player if they were to trade Robertson. Dallas is firmly in win-now mode, so the move could be a tough one to make. It was also reported they went after Marner, etc., etc., etc. You also had this article posted on NHLRumors.com. This is a little bit of a newer one, which is something I appreciate, the fact that people are still going out there and trying to give us the scoop as to what's new, quote-unquote. Was there any truth to the Dallas Stars and Jason Robertson trade speculation? Sick Podcast, Eye Test, this is the same show that we were looking at earlier. Jimmy Murphy asked Sean on the program, I want to ask you about Jason Robertson. You know, as the draft approached and pretty much into the first weeks of free agency, all we heard was that this guy was going to be on the move. How close had you heard he may have been to being traded? And if so, why wasn't he traded? Sean Shapiro then responded saying, yeah, and everything I heard about it was like, there's a big difference between shopping, we must sell and shop, and we're shopping for something of equivalent return. I think that's one of the things that kind of got lost in the big media cycle we're in right now. And so I don't blame people. Like, how do you fill headlines? How do you fill your paper between July 1st and 20th, right? Like, you're going to go through and say, hey, Jason Robertson would be a great fit. Yes, the Stars did look at it, and at what a return could be in Robertson. They did go through and do that from my full understanding of it. There, it also was never the, Jason Robertson was never going to move for, and this to the fans out there, he was never going to move for your second favorite prospect and your third round pick, right? Like, it was always going to be either for a roster player to come back, where you could get kind of some of that point totals back, or that kind of addition, or it was going to be part of some bigger move, right? Like, I don't know how they would have made it work, but we know that Dallas had kicked around the idea of going after Marner, who obviously ended up in Vegas. If they were going to go after Marner, that amount of money to sign Mitch would have had to come from somewhere. So really, that's all we've got to go off of with Jason Robertson. I don't think that anything was ever close, but based off of the way that it's being talked about, we kind of have an idea as to what the trade cost would have or potentially still is. I mean, roster player, that's a given. You want to get that point production coming back. You want to probably get a whole bunch of assets in return. It's not going to be for a measly prospect and a third. You would have to, at the very least, give up a first, multiple firsts maybe even, depending on the value of the other stuff. Jason Robertson, for as disappointing as you can say he has been by not scoring 100 points the past 2 years, still is an 80-point guy. Maybe he's not as good as we thought he was, but he's still good. I think the majority of NHL teams would love to add an 80-point score to their threshold. But the ultimate question still remains here. For Jason Robertson, if the trade return price is a roster player of equal value, of course, that severely limits how many NHL teams would be able to make a trade for this guy. But if you go down the multiple roster forwards and a draft pick and a prospect angle about it all, where do you think Jason Robertson could have ended up? If you're a fan of the Canucks or the Canadiens or whatever these teams that we've talked about, would you be willing to shell out a whole bunch of assets for this dude? It seems like he was on the market. There was an appetite to trade him from the Dallas Stars' point of view, but regarding the price, is it something you'd be willing to pay? It's not like Jason Robertson was available for a discount after all. So with all that in mind, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the idea of trading away Jason Robertson? How do you feel about the Dallas Stars and their trade demands for this guy? Let me know in the comment section all your opinions. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.